First, I'd like to bring you to a company and take you about 4 years back. You might have heard this one. It's a UK-based company, Scion. And they were in deep trouble 4 years ago. Do you know what you do when a company's in deep trouble? Hire a new CEO. That's quite common. They did so at Scion. And they brought this guy on board called John Connolly. And you know what? He was not really the usual CEO kind of guy. Because he went in there and said, I have to more or less fix everything to write this company. What I really need to work on first is to change how we innovate. I got to interact with Scion and had some good discussion with them. And I did an interview with John Connolly and asked him, so why do you actually want to do open innovation? Why do you want a modular approach to your innovation efforts? And he said something that stuck with me forever. We want to be competitively unpredictable. I just love the taste of it. Which company would not like to be competitively unpredictable? Okay, that's interesting. So I asked John, so how are you going to do this? This is where he's not a usual CEO, because how many CEOs would say this? I have no idea. But it's my job as the top dog, as the CEO, to create the right framework, the right conditions for this to happen. And I think that's a key element. That's a key mindset you need for open innovation, especially on the executive level. Create the framework, create the conditions for this to happen. I think we have some good introductions to what open innovation is, and like what you did there, Claire. When I'm asked about definition, I try to stay away from it. When I'm pushed, I would actually say that open innovation is hype, and I would prefer a word like external input. Get external input into the organization and prepare the organization to give them the right mindset for that to happen. What could external input look like? Well, you see the box down there? You know Starbucks? My Starbucks Idea. How many of you have been at mystarbucksidea.com to submit an idea? Actually, a few of you have. That's one of the most popular idea boxes you have out there. What's interesting here, everyone can participate. And there's not really any instruction. What kind of toilet paper would you like to see at Starbucks? What should the new flavor be? Anything goes. But one of the problems with crowdsourcing, it's been hijacked. It's been hijacked by the marketing department. It's not really about innovation. It's about marketing, creating relationships with your customers. That's what you see in many industries. That's also why at My Starbucks Idea, the implementation rate is something like 0.0014%. It's a marketing gimmick. On the other hand, you can go up to directive invitational. It's instructions and there are relatively few people. This is where you have innovation intermediaries. Perhaps you heard of companies like Nine Sigma, Innocentive. Basically what they do is they have big companies usually as clients. They have a problem to solve, the seekers, and they go to the outside world. Companies like Nine Sigma, Innocentive, they have more than 1 million people in their databases. So they help the big companies to frame the questions in a way that they can be understood by others. That's actually a big problem. Big companies, and even in certain industries, have a tendency to formulate things in the way they understand it. But that's internal jargon, which others do not really understand. So the big value that they bring these intermediaries is to change the wording so others can relate to the problems. So that's what they do. They go in and actually make sure that the seekers and the solvers can work together and solve problems. I talked about external input. Well, the challenge here is that you need to play all over this field. And you need to add in things that we've been doing for decades. So what's new about open innovation? It's been systematized. It's strategic in some companies today. And it's going to happen in all industries. To give you an example, we have one very famous company in Denmark called Lego. And it's one of the companies actually have the most touch points in the world. I'm going to say 4 letters now, AFOL. Anyone recognize AFOL in terms of Lego? It's actually called Adult Fans of Lego. You have grown-ups meeting together in thousands of communities worldwide to play with Lego. Okay, it's probably Lego Mindstorm and the more advanced things like that, but still, it's one of the companies with the most external touch points. But quite telling of open innovation in general, it was not until March this year they hired a senior guy in charge of open innovation and started to systemize their external efforts. One of the things I really like from Lego is Lego Cuso, which is a partnership where you can say the open innovation between two companies. You have Lego on one side, you have Cuso on the other. They get together, create a platform. On this platform, you can go in and submit an idea. An idea could be that I would like to see the Tower of London as a Lego set. Okay, that's interesting. They accept it. But then they tell me that in order for this to be produced, I need to get 10,000 people to vote for my idea. 10,000 people is quite many people. But if I get it, they'll do it. And more interestingly, they'll even give me royalty when this becomes.
They have done it.
They have done the Tower of London on the Lego set as well. But they're doing this in many, many different projects. Yeah. So you have open innovation, two companies working together. You have crowdsourcing to get the 10,000 people on board. You even have what we call co-creation. Lego and the company work together, getting the royalty. So there's so many words out there that could actually be what we call open innovation. But I prefer to use open innovation more like an umbrella term for external input. I said it could go to any industry. This is where it becomes a bit interesting for you guys. I observed that there are 4 things that really matters whether an industry or company is ready to embrace open innovation. The first one is the cycle time. How long time does it actually take to make a new product, to make a new service? I see some of you guys grinning because in this room, 5 to 15 years, right? That's a long time. May I ask you, does it cost a lot of money to make one of those you call blockbuster drugs? Can I get into that? It sounds interesting. I heard it's $1 billion to get into that game today. And the other thing, I mean, intellectual property, is it something you guys care about? That's a big deal. Okay. And I can second your point on the universities, definitely, from Patrick. How conservative is an industry? How open is it to new business models? And if you kind of add these 4 things up, you get an idea which companies would be ready for open innovation, which would have some more challenges. Okay, fast-moving consumer goods. It doesn't take that much to make a new bag of potato chips. So that's why fast-moving consumer good companies over here. And then you can start figuring why it's going to take a longer time for pharma to really embrace open innovation. However, I would actually say the conservative. There's some speculation from people outside pharma that you're a conservative business, but I live in Copenhagen. We have a very vibrant bioscience and also somewhat farm environment there. And it's not really that conservative in my view, so that kind of helps you guys. But I think you have some issues on the other 3 things. That does not mean that open innovation not come to your industry. It's just going to take a little longer. And you're already doing, I think we've seen some great examples here today, and GSK being one of the front runners in this. But it will take a bit longer for you guys to get it all the way through the industry. But there's no way of turning back now. I would even argue that open innovation as a term is gone 5 to 7 years from now. Hey, I live off open innovation, so why would I say that? That's my business. But the thing is, we have innovation, R&D, and then open innovation. One of the biggest problems you can do is to go and separate open innovation as an individual thing. It needs to be part of the package. Some of you rightfully said it needs to be part of the toolbox. But when you look at a company like Procter & Gamble, the poster boy, they started this 10, 12 years ago. When you go and speak with them today, they don't really care whether it comes from the inside or outside. They don't care if it's innovation, internal R&D, or it's external innovation. To them, it's just innovation. They don't distinguish, and that's what we're going to see in almost all other industries 5 to 7 years from now. It's just going to be innovation. But we're going to have a much higher external input to it than what we see today. I was asked to talk a little bit about what happens when big companies meet small companies. And just by show of hands, how many of the companies in here would you say are small companies, or at least not the big multinationals? Just by show of hands? That's actually most of you. Interesting. Okay. I have to say that it's still the case, and it definitely used to be just a few years ago. Small companies get to be roadkill when it comes to open innovation. You're roadkill, especially when big companies do not know what they're doing. And to be honest, it happens more often than you should think so. Well, you talk about innovation. I would say that small companies really do not innovate. Small companies, they try to survive. We have one product, one service. If we don't make it, we're dead. It's do or die. I would call that survival or intrapreneurship. Innovation, in the terms I have, and I work with big companies, is more about having some choices, some options, a strategy, and it does require certain size to do so. But some of the differences is that when you have a small company, you are more likely to break the rules, at least bend the rules, but sometimes even break the rules, not the law and such things, but the rules of how an industry should operate. You can more likely break that in a small company. You don't have to lay back on what we used to do. You can do things in completely new ways, and you have a different attitude towards risk that you bring along. So when you go in and take the elements, the progressiveness, the aggressiveness, agility of small companies, they have a lot to add to big companies. They have a lot to add to innovation ecosystem. And that's a big part, the ecosystem, because I have no doubt the future winners of innovation will be those who make communities, ecosystems work. All industries. And that actually goes in two ways. It's physical communities, and then I can give a small promotion, we'll talk later today. It's also how you can get virtual communities to work. But everyone should benefit in an ecosystem. Small companies can get access to the scale and big benefits of big companies, but the big companies got the driver's seat. It's the big companies who get the ecosystems together and set the directions where they like to go. One of the challenges of big companies, however, is that in any given industry you have like 2 to 4 big competitors fighting out against each other. And they very much want to get the best ecosystem, innovation ecosystem in place, try to create that. But if you're 2 to 4 companies, there's only going to be one clear winner of these big ones. And that's the one that becomes the preferred partner of choice within that ecosystem. The company that attracts the best smaller companies, universities, and make things happen. And here I can tell you, when you're a small company, you need to do your homework, because they might have a fancy portal, fancy website, and say, hey, this looks professional. But that's not where you should look. You should start asking people who actually worked with that company before. And more often than not, you'll learn that big companies have some difficulties making it happen. The real work on open innovation happens behind the scenes. What you'll often discover is that you go out and you have a good idea as a small company, and you're being embraced by a big company, and they're very open, they really understand you, they're ready to work with you, but that's the reception team. You need to hand this over to the business units where innovation happens. And there you get a totally different mindset in many cases. There you meet something called not invented here, not interested. Why do things actually go wrong? Well, writing some of my books, I spoke with Procter & Gamble, and especially had a great guy called Chris Tuin, who's now in a different company. But one of the things he really looked at, he was the head of Procter's Connect and Develop program. I think many of you have heard of that. But one of the things he really looked into is that if we don't have a match in values, the kind of thinking, big and small company, we're not going to succeed. That was one of his key lessons after being involved with the Connect and Development program for many years. We need to look at the softer side, not just the business potential. Do we have a match when it comes to values? And frankly, he also learned that too often they don't speak the same language. I was quite provocative 2 years ago because I said, open innovation is not for small companies. The reason I said so, when we talked about open innovation and innovation community, it was all about how big companies viewed open innovation. And how big companies do innovation is different than how small companies survive, do entrepreneurship. And you need to speak kind of the same language to make it work on open innovation. Another thing that Chris also mentioned is that once you get to work with a big company and small company together, get a nice, easy understanding of the working principles. up front. I can go to another case, Intuit. And to be honest, Intuit did great work on open innovation 2 years ago, but they're not really doing much today. But a former guy who ran this, and actually a former guy, I keep saying certain guys, it's incredible how important one individual can be in an open innovation program to drive it forward. If you don't have the right person in charge of things like that, very rarely it's going to happen. But this guy, Jan Bosch, who's outside Intuit now, one of the reasons stalled, he was quite interesting because when you go to a big company with an idea, they'll look at it and they'll say, hey, this is interesting. We will want to look into this one. They might even buy some of your stuff. But what you need to know that big companies say that to almost anyone approaching them if there's just a little bit of interest. What they do is just to make sure they know what's going on out there. And they would like to do reverse engineering and so forth. Well, you happen to be in a situation where you set up false expectations, false positives. Be careful about that. And now I'm get to behind the scenes. And don't get trapped into this closed innovation mindset. This is where small companies really need to do your homework. Speak with people who worked with the big company before. Get an understanding whether they really understand open innovation, especially when it gets down to the business unit level. About 10 years ago, we had an American consultancy company, Dublin Group, who looked into something interesting. Across industries, and I'm not sure how they did it, is probably having a very early idea and you kind of move a little bit forward, then you're dismissing it. But they had some very interesting facts to look into. They learned that 96% of all product innovation fail. 96%, that's ridiculous. That's a huge waste of money and resources. Okay, what's the reason here? Something they learned is that all the focus is on the products, the product performance and product system. And so if we invest more or less all our efforts in the products or the technologies, that's also where we should get the return on investment, right? Wrong. That's not where you get the payback. So what they went back and did was they came up with the idea that perhaps we need to look at innovation quite broadly. And they came up with an interesting framework called the 10 types of innovation. The 10 types of innovation. And you can see they grouped it into 4 categories. But the idea is that perhaps you should not only invest in the product or technology itself. Perhaps you have to invest, and perhaps even more, on how to get that product technology to market. Let me give you a few examples here. 15 years ago, we had an interesting company growing up called Dell Computers. Can anyone tell me why Dell Computer became a success? Just by show of hands and shouting out. Why did Dell Computers become a success? Customization. What could you do?
Loads of stuff.
Yeah, you could customize your own computer, right? Other reasons? That's a good one, yeah? Manufacturing. Distribution. They were really a game changer on how Enet is happening today, internet trade is happening today. But you know what the biggest difference was, what really built the company? I can ask you one question. What's the last thing we do when we pay on an online shop today? Oh, sorry. What's the last thing we do? That is to pay, right? Ka-ching, credit card. But what happens if you get your money up front and you pay your supplier 60 days later? You get cash flow. Boom. Business model innovation, finance. Remember, this was 15 years ago. Unheard of at that point, how they actually did the business. That cash flow built a company. When I look around here, I see lots of guys driving Harley Davidsons, right? How many of you, by show of hands, have a Harley Davidson? Come on. One guy. Okay, a few guys. A few. Okay. Not to offend you guys, all of you Harley Davidson drivers here, but when I see a Harley Davidson and another motorcycle, I see 2 things. I see lots of metal and see lots of electronics. I really don't care about the difference. But let me ask you, what sets a Harley Davidson apart? The brand? What? The brand why? Image. One specific thing. Okay, hey, shh, be quiet, try to be quiet. Okay. There's a motorcycle driving on the highway up there now. The sound. It's a small fishing boat coming through a small town sometimes. It's the sound. But in terms of delivery, getting a better experience, the image, the brand of Harley-Davidson, you know they tried to trademark that sound? And you know that car companies trademark how you slam a door? Seriously, they do. And the reason is we're getting better at innovation. And one of the reasons is we're starting to understand it's not really just about the products and technologies. It's how to get the products and technologies to market. It's becoming so much more about business model innovation today. What are some of the key things I would look for in innovators today, especially corporate innovators? Well, first of all, you need a more holistic view. Go beyond the products and technologies, as I just gave you an idea about here. Here you can see some of the other things. I like to point out that big companies usually need two kinds of people to make innovation happen. Innovation leaders, who set the strategy, direction, and also do some of the tactical work, but they also need people who can make things happen. I call them intrapreneurs. I think a term that we're going to hear much more about in the coming years, intrapreneurship. It's been here for 25 years, but very few big companies actually know of it. And basically, intrapreneurs are people like many of you who start a company outside the big company, but the intrapreneurs can do it within the big companies. Too often big companies are too focused on ideas. They need to start paying more attention to the people and how to match the right ideas with the right people. And you create the right framework and settings for that, you have something called intrapreneurship. By the way, I really like the 10 types of innovation here, because innovation today was very much about educating others. In a big organization, it's educating others up and down, but with open innovation, also about educating, teaching to a whole ecosystem. And this is a nice way to say that everyone can actually be involved. It's not that often you get to know that you can have finance people, the CFO, Dr. No, to be involved in innovation. Actually, I think those guys would be flattered that you start thinking about these guys when you think innovation. Perhaps they can contribute in some ways. Well, a little bit maybe. So, okay, my last slide here is pretty provocative, but I really would like to ask the question, will big companies kick small company butt? There's a good discussion going on in the innovation community right now. Who will be those who really lead innovation forward? Will it be, as the perception been for the last 10 years, small companies backed by VCs? We had some VC question here today. Venture capitalists, not the vice chancellor. Okay, will it be those companies or will it be the big companies? I think that things are changing in ways that big companies are going to kick small company butt. One of the reasons is that, as I talked about, the business model is key. Another reason is the fast pace of change that we have today. First of all, when it comes to innovation, you need to imagine a window like this about 10 years ago, probably like this, moving very, very slowly. Compared to today, that window, the window of opportunity is so much smaller. And by the way, it moves like this. Hitting this one is very, very difficult. And speed is an issue here. What open innovation can bring you is speed. And don't be wrong, open innovation is organizational innovation in big company. It's really, if it has to work, it has to be pervasive, it has to change how the whole organization works. But one of the other things about speed and transparency is that when you look at small companies, VC-backed companies today, well, if you have a good idea, it's going to be copied in an instant. That means small companies used to be able to grow for a few years and then take on the big companies. Today they need to fight a host of smaller companies, and it takes off the focus. And it slows them down enough for big companies to start picking up. And as big companies embrace open innovation and entrepreneurship, at some point, some of them, not all of them, will be more agile. And they will be able to not only work with smaller companies, but also to take the lead even more than today. But I would challenge you small companies to just keep pushing them. because it's going to help all of us. If all of us gets better to innovation. Do we have time for some questions?
We do, a couple.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. It's on.
Okay, Maureen Coleman with Innovate. 15 years ago, I stood in that very spot and talked about intrapreneurship to this great GSK, and they were going to get it on board. I stood there a few years later, as Alan Baxter will testify, with Tasha Yamada when we talked about open innovation. Eventually, I jumped ship and became to work with SMEs. And I think the key thing I know is that you talk about a big company, and a big company is a collection of lots of individuals. And talking to each individual within that big company, you get a different answer.
Yeah.
And so for open innovation to work, the whole organisation must be receptive to listening to ideas, both big and small, and not just the few people like Malcolm who do it on a daily basis. So I hope that this time round this campus works, because it was originally designed to stimulate creativity between the different disciplines in science, between biologists, between chemists, between medics. That's why this site was originally designed. So I hope it succeeds this time round.
Just a quick comment that I'm an outsider, but I'd like to really use my intuition, pick up signals, and the research I've done on the place here, and the things I heard this morning, looks pretty good. I think the time is right for this to happen.
That's my question. So what will make it different? Why will it work this time?
It will only work if GSK really learned the lessons and they're ready to open up. But as I said, too many signals point in the right direction. So I think it's going to be a better situation right now. And we also need to understand that intrapreneurs are often viewed as troublemakers in big companies. But you need to have room for troublemakers, the right kind of troublemakers. And not only big companies, but also in ecosystems like this. I think you're ready for it now. It's been 15 years, as you said.
I'm going to take one last question, then we really got to move on. I mean, I don't think we're going to be kicking any small companies' butts, because if we kick small companies' butts from within GSK, then people won't want to work with us. Word gets around very quickly.
Yeah.
We're good people to work with.
My name's Gail Chapman from Catalyst. I'm interested in how you measure or demonstrate the value of relationships in effective collaborative research and innovative projects. So my experience between working with big companies and academia is that a lot of the barriers are around trust, which you touched on, and not on IP or, they're secondary. But big companies often feel they already have everything in place to be able to frame their problems. And I work trying to, at that interface, how do you, they like, people like data, how do you demonstrate that value?
How do you demonstrate the value of what you can deliver to others, or how you use metrics to measure your success?
How can you measure the impact of early trust building on a project output?
I don't think you can. And to be honest, I mean, metrics and innovation is a difficult topic. We spent 20 years figuring out how to make it happen. We haven't. And I would say that we spend way too much time in some areas thinking about how to measure innovation. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's very difficult. But you're right, we need to focus on the softer spots like trust. And you need to find ways in which you can make that work for your organization. I don't have a clear answer on how to measure it. But I'm not sure that's where you should spend effort either.
No, so it's convincing people.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got to move on now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Stefan.